B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, January 20th, 2017. This is the dark day we've been dreading for months. The official installation of Donald J. Trump as the 45th President of the United States. I had to practice saying that. In our second segment on the podcast, we'll catch up on some of President Obama's final acts and unfinished business and a couple of other items. And we will get to the inaugural festivities and the speech that was delivered by Trump today. But first, I want to put a question out there, particularly to any listeners who still lend an ear to me, who were the staunch supporters of Hillary Clinton for president. Because I think this is a point of reflection. And I ask, how did we get here? Inaugurating a con man whose snarky tweets and vindictive assaults on just about everyone poison public discourse. His fans, some racist, some greedy, and many morons, made the election close enough to steal through voter suppression schemes that were unchallenged by the Democrats. Think back just a year ago. Bernie Sanders was surging, drawing large crowds despite sharply limited media coverage, and the fix that was in at the Democratic National Committee to prevent him from earning the nomination. Hillary Clinton was fending off the problems that she had created for herself, the private server email scandal, the stench of heavy influence peddling from the Clinton Foundation. She had flipped on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, went half in on minimum wage and the cost of college, and refused to release transcripts of her well-paid speeches to Goldman Sachs and other corporate audiences. Clinton's negatives were baked in her cake, and obvious to anyone outside the bubble created by the campaign and a corporate media that tilted toward Hillary even as they featured every tweet and phone call and fart from the orange comb-over. And at this time last year, John Podesta had already hatched the Blame Russia scheme, betting that linking Trump to Putin would lead many voters to hold their noses and vote for Clinton. And while the Sanders campaign wasn't perfect, he waited too long to bring Clinton's bad judgment as Secretary of State into the debate, and his grand dismissal of her damn emails was a big error early in the campaign. It was clear from the polls and from the efforts of Clinton allies to prevent Bernie from getting the nomination that Sanders was the only Democrat who could beat Trump. Sanders' appeal in purple states to young voters and independents, and his potential to expand support, unlike Clinton, were ignored by party leaders and many moderate Democrats who were convinced that Hillary couldn't possibly lose. And remember back, the heat that I got from Gary Kane in New Jersey and many other listeners who canceled their subscriptions to this podcast, because I was openly critical of Clinton and I acknowledged that she could lose. And then I became one of the few lefties, I don't know very many others, who flatly predicted that Trump would win. I made that wager with Tom Frank, the famous author, in August of 2016. And I don't have any special skills or wisdom or a Ouija board that told me this was going to happen. This is simply based on my observation of American politics for more than 40 years. And the trends that I saw, and the people I talked to in the Midwest who were willing to vote for Trump, indicated to me that the Democrats did not have a clue about how close Trump could get it so that the Republican schemes could rig the election in his favor. Party leaders and the superdelegates compounded the errors by ignoring the Sanders voters after the rigged primaries were over. And while the platform threw a few bones to the Sanders left at the Democratic National Convention, the arrogance of Hillary's allies on Israel, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, those are just two examples of how they insisted on maintaining a corporate establishment posture and not listening to the progressive grassroots. Now, while I remain skeptical of the claims of Russian interference and hacking, I do believe that many types of election fraud and voter suppression did rig the election for Trump. Clinton's refusal to support the recounts and allowing judges to shut them down even as fraud was exposed in Michigan cannot be explained. And over the past year, diehard Sanders supporters were ridiculed and ostracized and shamed in social media for refusing to shift to Clinton. They were derided as the Bernie or bust crowd. But to me, it was the Hillary or bust crowd that brought us the new dark ages of Trump. This includes the back-scratching insiders who were salivating over jobs in a third Clinton term, the Democratic leaders who bet the ranch in their own broken party on an obviously flawed candidate, and women who felt she was entitled in order to break the glass ceiling. But as a corporate tool, Hillary Clinton wasn't the right tool to break that ceiling, which will get even thicker under Trump. Ironically, it was the aging socialist with unkempt hair and $27 donors who would have protected women's interests and created the opportunity for a woman to become president in the foreseeable future. So, if you're still listening, Hillary supporters, I ask you to honestly meditate on the misplaced loyalties and the arrogance that brought us President Trump. The Democratic Party, which I'm not a member of, needs to rebuild its connection to working people and reject corporate-funded dynasties like the Clintons. That's not happening so far because as I was writing this, I just got another tone-deaf email from the Democratic National Committee asking for money because Trump was just sworn in. It's the same tired shit they've been pushing for years. Will somebody please tell them? So there it was on the exterior of the Capitol, the every 4 years ritual of swearing in a president. And there were a lot of weird scenes. It was uncomfortable for many people, there's no doubt about that. And Donald Trump, after being sworn in and giving a big thumbs up, and, you know, I have to say that overall, he restrained himself more than we have seen. And he's a lousy public speaker, but he did a decent job with a teleprompter speech. The ones he's given in the past were just terrible. So, you know, we can give him a B on delivery. But the posturing, the tone that he set, which was very dark, that America is a mess and only he can fix it. And he sounded a note that was just so obviously dishonest. The frame of his speech, and we'll get into some of the actual language in a minute, was about how we're transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people. And the instrument of that is a billionaire and his wealthy white buddies, most of whom are male, that comprise the wrecking crew cabinet that he has assembled. And so the disingenuousness, I know I can say it, of this, is certainly lost on most of the people who voted for Trump. But the rest of us, I think, can clearly see that he's promising the peasants that he is their man. And he'll throw them some bones and feed them some gruel. But the peasants are going to watch with jaws dropped as the wealthy get even wealthier, the deep divide between the uber wealthy in this country and the rest of us, the 1% and the 99%, will grow even bigger. And I think we're going to see a lot of tensions, a lot of protest from the people who are left behind. And they're not the white working class people who own a home and a couple of cars. It's going to be the people much lower on our class and socioeconomic ladders. Now, to the speech that he gave, I'm sure he worked on it very hard. We saw the photo op of him sitting at Mar-a-Lago in the receptionist's desk. Hat tip to Trevor Noah of The Daily Show for pointing that out. And he had a Sharpie out and a legal pad with what appeared to be nothing on it. And he was described as working on his speech at the Winter White House. In any event, some of the lines that he sounded were as blustery as some of the hyperbole that he used on his election campaign, and a lot of bromides, a lot of platitudes, feeding a lot of jingoistic American nationalist sentiments. And I touched on this phony notion that power is being transferred to the hinterlands. And it's not true. More power is being concentrated in Washington than even before. Now, one of the things that he did say is that Washington itself has flourished, but the people didn't share in its wealth. And the fact checkers at the New York Times point out that the Washington area has become one of the most prosperous parts of the United States in recent decades, thanks to the gross spending on the Pentagon and the so-called Homeland Security and surveillance infrastructure. But that is narrowly true. Then he went on with this us versus them mentality. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little to celebrate for struggling families all across the land. Now, what he did there was take a swipe at everybody that was on that stage with him behind the bulletproof glass. The leaders of both parties, including the Republican establishment, elected officials in the legislative branch. And that is pretty stunning, because you don't unify the government and unify the people with an us versus them message. And so the other darkness here is he describes mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted-out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge, and the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now, the authoritarian wannabe decreed. And he seems to believe that just by enunciating these things like an emperor, that everybody's going to fall in line, and the drug dealers and the gangbangers are just going to say, oh, wow, Donald Trump's president. I'm going to join the Seventh-day Adventists. And maybe he's hinting at the Duterte solution, the Philippine strongman who is encouraging vigilantes to shoot and kill alleged drug users and drug dealers. Then he slammed the sad depletion of our military. And while we've lost a bunch of conflicts that we don't quite call wars, the military, I'd say, is not depleted. If anything, it is overfunded and way too expansive. And he also talked about factories shuttered that left our shores, without mentioning that corporate executives who are cronies of his made the decisions to send those jobs offshore and to shutter those factories. And this is where Trump is dangerous, because I can see people in small towns in Ohio where the only factory in town shut down in the last 5 years, and they think Trump's going to reopen those factories. Well, I'll be happy to eat my words if he does, but that's highly, highly unlikely. And so he only made one reference to bringing back our borders, didn't talk about building a wall. He did feel compelled to use the phrase radical Islamic terrorism just to tweak Obama, who was wise in not insulting the worldwide Muslim population by using that kind of talk. And he also smacked, I guess, John Lewis and, by implication, everybody else in Congress. We will no longer accept politicians who are all talk and no action, constantly complaining but never doing anything about it. The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action, says the Donald. So this was a jingoistic exercise appealing to American nationalism and exceptionalism, promising that we're going to win again, and sure, he closed his speech by saying he's going to make America great again. But the proof will be in these actions, and I believe that the actions will generally contradict the words that he uttered on Inauguration Day. And meanwhile, as he raised his right hand and John Roberts administered the oath of office, Donald Trump fell into a criminal position. Because with the oath of office, he fell into violation of the Constitution's Emoluments Act. He's also in violation of the terms of the lease of the old post office that he's converted into the Trump International Hotel down the street from the White House. Because when people pay $700 a night for a room there, it violates the terms of the lease that says that the person leasing it, the company leasing it, cannot include anybody who is an elected official in the United States government. And so the ACLU today filed some suits to pursue these important conflict of interest issues. My question is, will the Democrats fight these matters? I'd say it's an open question, and I'm doubtful. At the same time, the New York Times on Friday is reporting, based on unnamed official leakers who will pay no penalty for their leaks, American law enforcement and intelligence agencies are examining intercepted communications and financial transactions as part of a broad investigation into possible links between Russian officials and associates of Trump, including his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, and 2 other Americans. The continuing counterintelligence investigation means that Trump will take the oath with his associates under investigation, and after the intelligence agencies concluded that the Russian government had worked to help elect him. Now, I don't believe those claims. I haven't seen proof. But these are complications. The Manafort issues, I think, are substantive. He was working for the corrupt Yanukovych government that we threw out in Ukraine in the coup that was broadly supported by the United States as a way to tweak Putin. And we'll have to see where this investigation leads and whether it is derailed by the new president. And it puts FBI Director Jim Comey into another hot spot because he fended off demands from Democrats at a confidential hearing last week in Washington, where he refused to acknowledge whether Trump and others are under investigation for the alleged Russian manipulation of our election. And now he's being embarrassed by leaks from his own agency where they're saying, well, there is an investigation on this. Now let's turn to some commentary. I'm linking in the show file for this podcast to today's column by New York Times political columnist David Brooks. Now, Brooks is a conservative. I've had him on the show once or twice. He's a gentleman. He and I have different views, but I do respect his intellectual capabilities. And considering his conservatism and republicanism and his consistent opposition to Trumpism, his remarks are not surprising, but they are notable. We've never had, he says, a major national leader as professionally unprepared, intellectually ill-informed, morally compromised, and temperamentally unfit as the man who took the oath today. Later, he says, he is all gut instinct, Trump, all blood and soil, all about loyalty over detached reason. His business is a pre-modern family clan, not an impersonal corporation, and he is staffing his White House as a pre-modern family monarchy. With his, let me say that again, as a pre-modern family monarchy, that's the right emphasis, with his relatives and a few royal retainers. Everything is personal, pulsating outward from his needy core. The very thing that made him right electorally for this moment will probably make him an incompetent president. He is the ultimate anti-institutional man, but the president sits at the nerve center of a routinized, regularized 4 million-person institution. Some on the left worry that we're seeing the rise of fascism, a new authoritarian age, and I am one of those. Brooks argues that gets things exactly backward. The real fear in the Trump era should be that everything will become disorganized, chaotic, degenerate, clownish, and incompetent. Trump is Captain Chaos, the ignorant dauphin of disorder. All the standard practices, norms, ways of speaking, and interacting will be degraded and shredded. And he hopes that people in his administration and in Congress will create systems so his ill-informed verbal spasms don't derail coherent legislation, and that the political system will unite to contain Trump. Now, I regard this as wishful thinking. The indicators are clear. Because of the way he demands loyalty and because of the way he bullies people, his cabinet officers and other appointees will be busting their butts to try to impress Donald about the regulations that they killed, the people that they threw out of work, the political scores that were settled. And I think it will be chaotic. I think that the population of the Trump administration will be very unstable. He'll be firing people left and right. But I think that we will see a wave of fascism, authoritarianism, police actions and law enforcement at the federal level operating without any oversight or any accountability. That's what I expect. From London, The Guardian weighs in on Trump's speech. Trump's speech was by turns bitter, blowhard, and banal. It boiled with resentment and contempt for politics and the checks and balances of the U.S. system. It was aimed at those who voted for him, not at those, the majority, who did not. It said barely a word about race. Its America First nationalism was crude and shameless. The speech seethed with scorn for everything about the capital city that he now seeks to bend to his will. It was, though, almost wholly empty of detail or of clarity about how its goals would be achieved. And that's true to form. Trump has given us no details about how his goals will be addressed. We are left to guess and to try to build a defense when we don't know what the offense will actually look like. From Jerusalem today, the Times also reports that Trump's vow to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem has opponents even in the right-wing Netanyahu government. Moving the embassy is not even close to the top of the list of concerns for even right-leaning Israelis who oppose the establishment of a Palestinian state. Many worry it would only set off new fighting with the Palestinians as well as the rest of the Arab world. And an Israeli columnist who's written a book on the issue of moving the embassy, Akava Eldar, says if you talk to serious people, they say don't do it. They don't think it's worth it. Everything is so fragile right now. And even Avigdor Lieberman, the knuckle-dragging, now defense minister in the Netanyahu cabinet, said, we saw in all the American election campaigns that they say they'll move the embassy to Jerusalem. We have enough challenges around us, and I think it would be a mistake to turn the matter of the embassy into a central one. Okay. Ron Wyden, the senator from Oregon, has delayed but not blocked the confirmation process for the incoming CIA director, Mike Pompeo. And this is based on concern about a couple of answers that Pompeo gave in his confirmation hearing the other day. One was Pompeo backed away from his plan to reinstate the collection of all metadata and not to have the phone companies hold it under the USA Freedom Act, but to return control to the intelligence community. Now, it would be the NSA that manages that, not the CIA. So this is not really directly related to his job, more or less. But also, in correspondence with the Intelligence Committee, Pompeo wrote that it was appropriate for the CIA to receive intelligence from other agencies of other governments that is not based on policies, including, the requirement of a warrant, when it relates to so-called U.S. persons. So this is like Wyden. He is a master of process, but he often concedes on important policy matters once his process issues are addressed. Who's paying for the parties in Washington tonight? Well, Anthem Blue Cross, which will benefit from the unraveling of Obamacare, is one of the sponsors of the Indiana Ball. Other sponsors include BP America, Coke, Duke Energy, Ford, Honda, Honeywell, the coal giant Peabody Energy, just coming out of bankruptcy. The New Jersey Ball, the Golden State inaugural ball. We'll watch Chris Christie dance his big ass off. Brought to you by the drug industry. Bristol-Myers Squibb, Novo Nordisk, Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals. Oh, and also Prudential Insurance. And the big sponsors of the Heartland Ball include Abbott Labs, Motorola Solutions, Archer Daniels Midland, Monsanto, and all of the usual corporate suspects. So, the protests are already underway as I speak to you at about 2:30 Pacific time here on Friday. More than 90 people have been arrested in Washington, and there are protests all over the country. When I finish the podcast today, I'm going into the county seat here of San Rafael and join some fellow opponents of the Trump administration. Here in San Francisco, too, the headquarters of Uber was a target of protests, as was the former Bank of America building, which is now, I think, one-third owned by the Trump organization. So people are taking to the streets. And I have a little advice that I shared on Facebook last night. If you're going to a protest and you do not want to be surveilled by the government, at least as a minimum, turn off your cell phone. Because with Stingray and with their access to our social media, they can follow what the protest organizers are planning and the moves of individuals, including that text message that you send to Molly saying, "I'll meet you on the corner of 6th and A." So if you want to be off the radar, people tell me you got to actually remove the battery from the phone. But my belief is if you power the phone off, it is not connecting with cell towers, it is not announcing your location, and it is not immediately accessible through Stingray. I hope I'm right about that. Every day I pause to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And today I want to single out one guy, Mike Minton from the Sacramento area, Fair Oaks, California. And he recently kicked in $50 without asking for a subscription. He just wants to support my work. And then, following the Golden Globes broadcast, he noted Meryl Streep's call for support of independent journalists. And Mike writes, "My support will be directly to those I have come to trust. Should your service demand additional support, we will do what we can." Well, when I need to lawyer up Mike, I'm going to reach out to you. And this really touches me. I really appreciate this expression. And I think that we are going to need to rally around independent voices during the demagoguery of the Trump era. And there may be efforts to crack down on the media in ways that are clearly unconstitutional. And I will fight those until they come and break down my door here and unplug all my equipment and stop me from podcasting. Just before he left office, on Thursday, President Obama announced the final transfers of prisoners from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. 4 additional individuals were sent away, and the population will be reduced to 41 until Trump loads it up with bad dudes, I guess. And this, of course, is a real disappointment, not only for me, but I'm sure for President Obama. He wrote, "As president, I have tried to close Guantanamo. When I inherited this challenge, it was widely recognized that the facility, which many around the world continue to condemn, needed to close. Unfortunately, what had previously been bipartisan support for closure suddenly became a partisan issue. Despite those politics, we have made progress," and he didn't acknowledge that he's leaving a large group of men, somewhere around 25, without charge or trial, and subject to indefinite detention. No, he didn't mention that. Obama is great at the selective omission. But these men, a Yemeni named Yassin Ismail, a Russian named Ravil Mingazov, and an Afghan named Haji Wali Mohammed were sent to the United Arab Emirates, and Jabran al-Qahtani was sent to Saudi Arabia. And there's one guy who is an ethnic Rohingya. I believe they're from Myanmar, Burma. And they couldn't find any place to put him. So he's got to stay at Guantanamo. I mean, this is outrageous. 2 other men who were cleared for transfer were left behind because they were from Algeria and Morocco, and the U.S. doesn't think that it is wise to send them there. And these men fought a last-minute court battle that Obama could have relented on, and instead he opposed a court-ordered effort to remove these men from Guantanamo before Obama left office. I find that deeply shameful. And as an American, I feel true shame about that. We have confirmation that Obama declined to issue clemency to Leonard Peltier, the American Indian who was incarcerated way back in 1973 after the Wounded Knee confrontation. It's tragic. We also saw a confirmation letter go out to Don Siegelman, the former governor of Alabama, whose request for clemency was denied without explanation by Obama. Julian Assange has renewed but modified his offer to come and face the music here in the United States. He said, well, I stand by everything I said, including the offer to go to the United States if Chelsea Manning's sentence is commuted. But it's not going to be commuted until May, so we have time for many discussions. Now, the other issue, as I pointed out yesterday, is there is no known indictment or extradition order for Julian Assange, and he seems to be trying to get clarity from the U.S. Justice Department. He said that either there's a deliberate attempt by the U.S. Justice Department to keep me and WikiLeaks in a state of uncertainty, abusing the process, or there is a sealed indictment. And there he has, I think, a very accurate point. We shouldn't keep playing games on this, and if he has been secretly indicted, and if there is a secret extradition warrant for him, well, maybe Trump will bring that public. We have no idea what Trump's going to do. And just a couple of other quick items today. In Brazil, where the car wash scandal has roiled politicians of virtually every stripe, and we saw the coup by impeachment of Dilma Rousseff earlier this year. Well, one of the critical judges at the center of the corruption investigations, 68-year-old Teori Zavascki, was killed in a plane crash on Thursday. Now, the justice had ordered the arrest and imprisonment of a senator from the Workers' Party, Rousseff's party, going back a couple of years. And last year, he ousted the Speaker of the lower house, Eduardo Cunha, who had orchestrated the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff and had his own Swiss bank account embarrassments. So this could put an end, or at least a huge hold on the corruption investigations in Brazil. Across the bay from me, the city of Oakland has been subject to periodic extortion from the Oakland Raiders of the NFL. The Raiders threatened to move to Los Angeles, and then they did. Then they extorted Oakland and said, we'll come back if you build us luxury boxes and spend a lot of money you don't have. And Oakland did. And now, before the Raiders have paid off the money that Oakland borrowed to build up the stadium for them, they plan to run off to Las Vegas, where Sheldon Adelson and Goldman Sachs have agreed to finance a new domed stadium. And this is something that goes on all the time. Communities are pressured. They say, oh, the team's going to leave if you don't build them a stadium. And it is a legal form of extortion that occurs all too often in this country. And finally, I don't know the group behind this color full-page ad in today's New York Times that reads, "We the people are greater than fear." They have a website, wethepeople.org. Oh, wethepeopleare.org. Oh, well, maybe I forgot to add R when I went to... Well, I found the website for this thing, and it gives you absolutely no information about who's involved in it, how they get their money. They appear to have a straight-up pro-constitutional, restore constitutional rule. They list the Bill of Rights on their website. But we have no idea who these people are. So it's either another secret plot by the Russians or some plan by great Americans to restore constitutional rule in this country. But I can't tell you which. Thanks for joining me today for my news and comment here on this dark day in American history. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.